With so many tools and definitions, the data integration world can be overwhelming. So in this video, we're going to help you make sense of it all with a quick tutorial on the three main categories of data integration: automation, sync, and ETL. For each of these three categories, we'll talk a little bit about what they are, who they're for, and exactly how you can use them in your personal workflow. Automation is a type of data integration that involves if this, then that flows. So basically, you're set up with a trigger block, and when that trigger block is triggered, you can set up what you want to automatically happen afterwards, right? So when a form is submitted, as an example, you might want to send an email or send a Slack message. That's automation. Automation is one of the most popular categories because it is so widespread. So some of the key tools are ones you've probably heard of, like Zapier, Make, and Mercado. But there's also plenty of other startups like N8N, Relay, and Parabola that all live in this automation world. So who is automation for? Automation tools are pretty much for anyone. What you'll honestly see is founders, marketers, customer support, operations, sales, all using some form of automation because it is a very low-level tool that can be used for pretty much anything you need. But some of the most popular use cases for automation include lead management, customer support, and project management. Basically, these are areas where automating a connection between two tools is really common and really popular. And so we can show you a quick example here. So here's an example of using automation for lead management. This is a very simple Zap in the tool Zapier. And basically what this is doing is saying when there's a trigger, so this is a type form submit event. So when a new user submits this type form, then take an action, which is to add that user, that contact, into our email newsletter tool, and then take another action, which is to add that user into our Notion database, right? And so this is a pretty classic example of how automation works. It is a series of if this, then that statements, and lead management is a great example of where this is really useful. So you don't have to manually keep track of this data here in Typeform and then copy it over from place to place. Integration category number 2 is sync. So sync or syncing is when you're continuously sharing a set of data across 2 or more apps. Right, so to compare this with automation, syncing is much less about creating your own if this, then that statement and flow, and much more about saying, I have all of this data in one app, like let's say Salesforce, and I want to continuously sync it and share it to another app. So some of the key players in the sync world include us, Whalesync, and another tool called Unito. They tend to focus a bit more on the project management side, so syncing tools like Asana and Trello, whereas we on Whalesync sync more CRMs and databases like Postgres, Salesforce, and HubSpot. But fundamentally, in the sync world, we are talking about letting 2 sets of apps share the same set of data. So while syncing can be used for a number of different things, it mainly is used by folks in operations and engineering. So these are 2 areas where people tend to want to connect their tools in a deep and often bi-directional way. So some common examples of that include building a customer 360. So you can think about connecting something like Salesforce to HubSpot so that anytime you have a lead, it gets synced up with your deals in Salesforce, or connecting things like Salesforce and Postgres, right? Or Salesforce and Apollo, so that whenever a deal progresses, you can put that person or that contact from your CRM into your email tool to automatically send them emails, right? Anywhere where you have something like a customer record and you just want to share that customer record across your tools, sync really comes in handy. The other big use case is internal tools, right? So if you think about connecting something like HubSpot to Airtable, you can essentially use Airtable as a front end to control your CRM. So again, this is the type of use case where it's not that whenever there's an update in your CRM, you want to do XYZ. It's literally, I just want to share all of my data that's in one spot and control it from another. So we can give you a quick peek into Whalesync to see what that looks like. So here's an example of using sync for Customer 360. So this is a Whalesync, and here I've set up a 2-way sync between HubSpot and Postgres. So this is my CRM and this is my database. And what I'm saying here is whenever there is a new contact or an existing contact, I want to send that data into Postgres specifically for their email, their first name and last name, And same idea in the reverse. If I add or update a contact in this Postgres database, I want that to sync into my HubSpot CRM, right? And so instead of trying to construct a series of if this, then that statements, to set up sync for something like this, you are going to simply map your tables and map your fields together, and the sync tool will do the rest. But ultimately what's great here is that I'm able to take a piece of data like a contact record and essentially share it across other tools. Our third big category of data integration is ETL. So ETL stands for extract, transform, load, but essentially it's the process of creating a data pipeline to get data from your business tools like a Salesforce or HubSpot into your data warehouse, so something like Snowflake. There are also a handful of players in the ETL space, but some of the really big ones include Fivetran and Airbyte. Unlike the tools in the automation and sync space we just talked about, which have somewhat broad and very operational focused user bases, ETL tools are really focused on data engineers and engineering. And ultimately, the goal for these data engineers is to pull that data from their business tools, again, often things like the CRM, into a warehouse so that they can run analytics, right? As their users interact in all these different pieces of software, it creates pretty important data that, if analyzed, can actually provide a lot of business value. So an ETL is really just about building that pipeline so you can get it into your warehouse and run analytics. So let's take a quick peek at Airbyte to show you what an ETL tool looks like from the inside. So here's an example of Airbyte. It's one of the big players in the ETL space. And just to get a sense of how Airbyte works or how ETL works in general, is you can kind of see here a set of connections. And one connection is essentially sending data from a business app like Zoom into your warehouse like Snowflake. So if we click into this, you can see a list of jobs that have run. So here, let's take a look at this job. It took about 13 minutes. It loaded 8 records. And an ETL can run continuously or manually if you prefer, to essentially send that data from, again, a place like Zoom into Snowflake so that you can run analysis on that data that's input into your warehouse. So again, this is much more of a developer tool or a tool for data engineers to pull data into their warehouse than an operational tool like you might see with automation and Zapier or operations and Whalesync. In summary, there are a ton of different types of tools and categories for data integration, but the 3 big ones for you to be aware of are automation, sync, and ETL. And if you're familiar with those 3, you'll basically cover 80% of the landscape that you'll need to get your work done.